Danda, who I know you doesn't need to be introduced because you've already spoken today, and Professor Gabor. Professor Danda is a professor of law and very much involved in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And also, Professor Gabor is a well-known, independent activist on mental health issues, working in Hungary and on the EU level and on the international level, and also very much involved in the Convention, in the drafting process for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we go straight to you. You're going to do this as a conversation of story and response. Thank you.
One of the things I'm always told, as somebody who's very passionate about questions of legal capacity, that this is not relevant for most people in their everyday life. It's only about the rich, it's only about developed countries, it's only about people who have lots and lots of laws to deal with. For most of us, it is irrelevant.
Now we are going to tell this story because we want to demonstrate that it is a very everyday issue for all people. And also, for me, this story is important because I had to understand how strongly interrelated identity with legal capacity. When in 2008 I went to India for half a year, I had already been through the negotiations of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. My own image about myself, my identity was that I was among the recognized, internationally recognized human rights defenders working in the field of disability rights. And I faced in this story a situation where my integrity was and identity was basically nullified. And it had impact on my legal capacity. This entire story we narrate with dedicated lines, but not static roles. We both aspire to be central players in our own life choices. We both provide and receive support. This story is our joint encounter with legal capacity and support.
The story starts with the fact of me receiving an invitation from the Indian Psychiatric Society, where they wanted to debate the fact of whether persons with mental illness should be allowed to marry. My response was that with the CRPD, this has become an obsolete question. Maybe what may be worthwhile doing is to have what kind of support people with disabilities would need if they are to marry. And instead of having two psychiatrists slug it out, it may be good to have a psychiatrist, a carer, and a person with disability to be on the panel. I was happy to facilitate.
When Amita told me about this invitation, I had several apprehensions. Number one, the issue was very personal and intimate to me. I had been living in a marriage. We also wanted to have children, and we failed in that. We wanted to adopt. Both my wife and I myself have been living with the diagnosis of mental illness, psychosocial disability. We pioneered in Hungary to achieve a positive decision after long years that we were made eligible to adopt, and yet we failed. That was one of the reasons, this post-trauma potential in the issue which was discussed in the public, because marriage is part of the family and children often come from there. But that was only one apprehension. Another one was that I had spent years, literally, with attending conferences of psychiatrists where, for the sake of political correctness, token users are invited. And after a while, I really got sick and tired of it. I burned out. Thanks God, then the negotiations of the CRPD started. I jumped in and dived in the cross-disability activism besides working for the rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities. and that was a liberating experience. I did not want to waste more time with psychiatrists. Frankly, this is not to deny that it is very important that there are colleagues, there are peers who engage with psychiatrists. As Jolaine, whom you heard today, says, the key is in the psychiatrist bucket. Without the psychiatrists, without engaging with them, without trying to challenge them, we will not bring about real changes. But I was very much traumatized by my earlier experiences of being the token user in a psychiatric conference. And I also was concerned about how the funnel will work. What will be the dynamic of the funnel? And I could not really formulate my concerns very well for Amita.
You know, he kept asking me, what is the strategy? How are we going to deal with this whole question? I suppose all his apprehensions were coming in those questions. And I kept telling him, I am the person who's facilitating the panel. The psychiatrist will speak first, the carer will speak second, and you speak last, so you can go and kind of kill it off at the end. And it's settled, you know, you don't have to worry about it. And I felt I had worked it out. For me, sequence was strategy, and it was all sorted.
So I had all these apprehensions, and yet I decided to accept the invitation for a number of reasons. First of all, because Amita was the chair of the panel, and I did not want to betray her. And the other thing is that my earlier experience in India as a white person, a European, was a very positive experience. It happened several times to me that people in the street stopped me and asked me to be photographed with me. I decided, in Hungary, in Europe, I am not an interesting being. Almost everybody is like me. So I hoped that my white skin will protect me in that meeting of Indian psychiatrists. But then things started to go wrong. It started with my arrival to the place, which was Chennai. I arrived earlier than Amita. We traveled from different places. And psychiatrists met me at the airport, and they drove me to my hotel. And they literally did not recognize me. They did not talk to me. I was absolutely invisible for them. This was not a very nice start. But then there was a night. Amita in the meantime arrived. We had relaxing lunch, dinner together. And next morning, we decided to look into the conference, how the venue looks like, how the deliberations happen. I had never met Indian psychiatrists before, I think. Now, we entered the room. There were about 2,000 Indian psychiatrists. I had never seen so many psychiatrists. Of course, all the pharmaceutical industry posters with advertisements of nice and less nice drugs on the decoration. And the scientific session was not very promising. They used humiliating, derogatory language to describe me and my peers. They might have not been even aware of the fact that there was somebody in the room who is on the other side, who had been diagnosed not by them, but by their colleagues in Hungary. And the themes of the conference was basically, how to fix people who have brain disease. And of course, dangerousness and incapacity were the two most frequently used words. Not a good start. Then came the lunch, which went even more wrong. Nobody, literally nobody came to me. Nobody talked to me. While it is quite usual, that if in a conference there is one foreign expert whom I thought was, then people try to socialize with them. It did not happen. I felt absolutely lonely, absolutely lost. My anxiety level went to the skies. and I could not imagine how the panel will happen. And then, the panel consisted, as Amita said, a psychiatrist, a caregiver, myself as a user, and of course Amita as the chair. The psychiatrist was the first speaker, that was Amita's strategy. And basically his position was, and we are post-CRPD of course, that the CRPD does not require that all people with mental illness can marry. Because for some people with mental illness, happy marriage is not possible, unfortunately. And it can even further deteriorate the condition of those mentally ill people. So that was his position. The caregiver's position was a little bit more progressive. In theory, she acknowledged that there is a right, a universal right, to marry, or even for people with mental illness. But she added that because there are no support systems, no institutionalized support systems to support those couples, who are mentally ill and decide to marry, this right also exists, but it cannot really be enjoyed and exercised.
So what did Gabor say? Gabor kind of made the most conceptual intervention in the sense of saying that, all right, why we need to worry about, or why we need to be ensuring that people with disabilities have the right to marry, because marriage and employment are your two routes to social connectedness, are your two routes of social communication. It is important to recognize the right and build up the support, because when the sort of travails and troubles all married lives have also happen to people with disabilities, but the kind of support which is extended to all others is not extended to people with disabilities, and that's what is wrong. That is like against the entire principle of equality and non-discrimination. It was the only kind of exposition in that entire panel which was looking at why we need to be talking about, not just that you need, the right to marry should be there, but why you need to have support for the right to marry.
The panel was a very conventional and conservative panel, in spite of all the efforts from Amita. People were talking one after the other, and there was very little reflection among the panelists. So after the speakers finished in the panel, the floor was given to the participants to ask questions, make comments. And again, it was a very strange, disempowering, and humiliating experience. First of all, very few people had any comment on the right to marry, or marriage, or support which may be necessary. The most recurring themes were, again, dangerousness and incapacity. Some people addressed the marriage issue. Some people even asked questions which were obviously meant to be addressed to me, but it did not happen that way. All the questions were addressed to Amita. I was literally invisible. My identity was not recognized at all. This morning we heard that one of the components of legal capacity is identity. Now, that is the simpler part. Agency is the more complicated part. From me, not legally, but de facto in that conference, the more basic element of legal capacity was denied. And what did Amita do? And how did I receive it? Of course, what happened between the participants and non-existing me was enormously frustrating. I felt that I was in a different universe, or I went completely mad and I lost my sense of reality. Anita tried to mediate the deliberations, tried to raise the issue that psychiatrists need to rethink their image about people with mental illness. They are supposed to help us. They are not supposed to control us and prohibit certain things from us, which is entitled to everybody else in the world. But she did not go far enough. She did not use a strong language. She was soft. She was, in my perception, overly courteous to psychiatrists, and I was very angry for that. I can tell this now. It was very painful because a very close friend prefers psychiatrists. To me, that was my perception about the thing. And for me, that also meant that at least the questioning of my identity was shared by her also.
He's telling a lie. He's telling a lie in the sense when he says, I should tell you now. He told me right then. But I suppose it was for me one of my most vulnerable moments. What the psychiatrists were doing was wrong, and I knew it. I was telling them that it is wrong. What I did not tell them, and which has been, and I suppose in some ways will remain a lifelong regret, was that I told them that what their general attitude was wrong. I told them that they needed to think in a rights consonant manner. What I did not tell them, and which I should have told them, and must have told them, was that you will not forget about what you will do in the future. Forget about what you will do as such. You know, what is required of you. What you need to confront with is that you have a person with psychosocial disability sitting before you, giving you a well-articulated argument for why support needs to be set in place, and none of you has the courage to look him in the eye and speak with him, and that's what is wrong in what you are doing. If I look back, I can say that the 200-strong psychiatrists for him were also 200-strong psychiatrists for me.
2,000.
Oh, 2,000, sorry, 2,000. It was like a hall full of people, a really big hall, and you couldn't really see them. They were like sardines, sort of back there. And they had invited us. So you were, I suppose, playing some kind of a middle-class good manners sort of thing. You did not think what is the kind of challenge and how far it should have gone. And then, much later, I sort of understood that when Gabor was asking me, what is your strategy? It meant was, I needed to have settled before I went there, how much I will take from them, where is it that one has to put one's foot down, how much of battle you are willing to do. It could not be like a drawing room conversation. As I look back and I see what I did not do right was, I somewhere conducted it like a drawing room conversation and not sort of a life-threatening, in a way a life-threatening kind of event which was happening in a sort of a social event somewhere. You know, like you go to conferences also sometimes to socialize with people. It was for me more or less something like that. It became something very, very different. So, what to do? Gabor was, like he said, you know, he was feeling traumatized and shattered. I was feeling very disappointed and unhappy, and I felt it was a bad decision. We made a big mistake, but what to do? You have the caves of Mahabalipuram, which is about some kilometers away from Chennai, very beautiful. It's a sight worth seeing. So I told him, just let's go to Mahabalipuram. We sort of went off on a day-long trip. It was like, we just need to get out of, it's like a bad taste in the mouth. We need to spat it out. And that's what we have to do. And it was really, really very beautiful. It was my first visit also, because of the fact that you had a tourist whom you had to show around, a visitor which you wanted to do. I was also going to Mahabalipuram. And so by the end of the day, I felt, okay, we have such beautiful caves, such a lovely sea, the entire day was wonderful. Damn psychiatrists. And it was over for me there, and we came to the airport.
It was not over for me. It's not an accidental thing that I have been labeled with psychosocial disability and Amita. Not. Next day at Chiang Mai airport, the real collapse started. Amita did not find her boarding pass. I got very angry. We started quarreling, and that is how we departed. I lost my self-esteem. I really thought that my value, my contributive value, my being value is zero, non-existent. Then I arrived at Pune, which was my base in India, and I felt absolutely lonely. All colleagues started to help me, started to support me, but they asked the wrong question. They asked me, Gabor, what do you want? What do you need? And at that stage, the only thing I could not answer was what I wanted and what I needed. I was seriously thinking about leaving India immediately, going back home, and this was the midterm of my 6-month program. I really ended up in a major crisis. People tried to tell me they didn't know how to do that. I could not guide them. It was a mess.
Well, I knew he wasn't doing well because he went to Pune and I came back to Hyderabad where I work. And in one of our kind of like trying to establish contact, when I knew he wasn't doing well, I asked him, do you want me to come? And his response was, it's your choice. And I suppose it was, I work on a full-time job. It is like I had to take a great decision. And my thing was that if I'm not there to support him, when he came to this country on my invitation, because we were convinced about the fact that in India, if we want to give a fillip to self-advocacy, we cannot get that self-advocate from India. We will have to have a person from outside who can demonstrate to people with disabilities in India that it can be done, and that might give the trigger, it may catalyze self-advocacy. It isn't that kind of a, like with that sort of very huge responsibility which I had placed on him and had invited him. And then we went for a psychiatrist conference without requisite thing, and he was in trouble. So you felt a huge kind of moral responsibility. And that's wherein sort of I decided to make my visit to Pune and spend time with her. I presume the kind of the critical point which
you see, we arranged it. We are doing what we promised. We are dialoguing. Amita came, and for me, it was important because in India, she was the person who had known me for the longest time. We first met in the ad hoc committee which negotiated the convention. I told her much about my life. She could guide me. She could remind me about my earlier crisis situations and recall what choices I made then. And that helped me a lot to redefine the crisis in which I was in, to imagine options. And also she told me something. She told me something very important. What did you tell me?
What I told you, Gabor, was that you cannot ever blame yourself for somebody else's bad behavior. And it was bad behavior and prejudice and, you could say, an uneducated conduct of so-called educated professionals that you were on the receiving end of. It needed to be condemned for just that. We do not have to. I mean, somebody else's bad behavior cannot be your self-defense. It cannot be you were called because you had the capability of self-defense. And I think from there we started our renegotiation.
Yes, and that was very helpful for me because together with recalling further earlier crisis situations and how I responded to them and how I solved them, besides that understanding, that the problem is not me, or at least I am only a small part of the problem, helped me come out from this very deep crisis.
So I suppose where was the entire capacity thing for us? Why did Gabor come? Gabor came to India because we wanted to demonstrate to people in India that a diagnosis of psychosocial disability is not something which is, puts an end to your participation, your autonomy, your agency, it was extremely important somewhere that it had to succeed. And hence it became then that, okay, we work out a mechanism. And, so this everyday success was very critical to what we needed to do. We needed to devise mechanisms by which we have to do it. And it's therein that we arrived at, let me just say one small thing here. Why did one want a self-advocate? Because when you want to change reality with professionals other than self-advocates, they very often are clinical about the entire exercise. The kind of point which Gabor made that if he could put me as with the psychiatrist because I didn't fight hard enough, because I did not fight hard enough, then evidently it's like a very easy for a non-self-advocate or an advocate who's not fighting for himself or herself alone to kind of negotiate off the other person's rights. On the other hand, when a self-advocate advocates, what is it that we run into trouble on? Because we have had this very big privileging of objectivity, you run into this difficulty that, you're biased in your own favor. You are so involved that you cannot see what you're not doing right. You need to sort of calm down because it is affecting you, so you're angry and you're passionate. That passion moves, but that passion is also turned on its head and made the person move. So it was extremely important somewhere. I suppose possibly you could say from a very ableist way of looking at things, but it was important for me that the tour should succeed. At the same time, like I said, we wanted to find a way out of that. You do not want to do the advocacy in this clinical for the other kind of way. You don't want the person with the person who's the self-advocate to then be hoisted on his own petard. You don't want that either to be done. And so we arrived at a way of what we call as an economy of passion and commitment. And that economy of passion and commitment meant that we would come to every venue just as the meeting started. You would do a passionate thing and vanish before they knew where you were. So it was like for a while, had to do it in that kind of way and work it out as a strategy. The entire tour was saved, excepting for one event which we cancelled in Calcutta. Everything else went exactly as scheduled.
Amita said that she might have been ableist. I have to acknowledge that not only able-bodied and able-minded people can be ableist. I had to discover that I had ableist attitudes also because I equally wanted to be successful with my disability. Failing in another country would have been a disaster for my entire career. And also, I had to understand after recovery from the crisis that anger simply prevented me from the recognition that Amita is not a disabled person, also has vulnerabilities, and may also require support. And when she did not do something for me, what I needed, I thought that she did not do that because she didn't want. I had to rethink it and understand and learn that this was not the case. She was simply unable because she did not have the support she would need for that. And I think that with this we come back to the beginning, and I suggest that we read again the opening lines, because I do think that for me the lesson is that legal capacity is not such a thing that persons with disabilities exercise it with support. All persons need support to exercise our legal capacity. This entire story we narrated with dedicated lines, but not static roles. We both aspire to be central players in our own life choices. We both provide and receive support. This story is our joint encounter with legal capacity and support. Thank you.
Hendrik, who's going to tell us her story from the perspective of a person denied legal capacity and how she overcame those obstacles. Go ahead. Great.
And now we're going to present Claire's story in a conversational, so a bit of Q&A between her, and show you some slides which represents Claire's history and her capacity to purchase a house and what difficulties she's experiences throughout that. So Claire, can you tell me about yourself, where you grew up and who you grew up with?
I grew up in Florida. I lived with my mum. I was her carer, and when she died, I only found out I had an intellectual learning disability. As you can see, that's where I live, and that's my little brother. Yeah.
And so what happened, you were your mother's carer for a number of years, so what happened after she passed away?
My mother's house was put up for sale. My older brother did it, and things kind of spiraled out of control then.
And so what happened after your brother took control? And
The house everything was mine, but because the will wasn't signed, they were going to take me to court. But I didn't know at the time. My mum had me assessed when I was younger that I found out I had an intellectual learning disability. But yet I was a carer for 5 years.
okay, so what happened after? What did your brother do after that? Did he?
He put the house up for sale and went on holidays and left me to deal with it. So it was a lovely time.
Was this shortly after your mother passed?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. So was anything explained to you, or?
No, my aunt and my cousin went to the solicitors with me, and then they started taking legal proceedings. So it took a couple of years to get everything to come through.
Okay, so in that meantime, though, who applied for a ward of court for
The
you?
solicitor at the time that we got, because things were kind of just getting messy and nobody knew anything at the time, so it was just easier to make me a ward of court.
Mhm. And did they explain to you what a ward of court was, or what the implications was for it?
No.
No.
They just said everything would work out a lot better, which actually turned out a lot worse.
Mhm. And did anybody describe or go through the procedures with you at all?
No,
Okay. So what happened when you were being assessed for a ward of court?
I had to see a psychiatrist, which I was in a vulnerable state. I was my mother's full-time carer. I didn't know anything at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so everything was up in the air, but if I had known now what it entailed, there's no way I would have.
Mm-hmm. And what changed after you were being made a ward of court?
All your decisions were taken away from me. I couldn't even go to the doctor. I couldn't get married. I couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're living off week to week, not knowing if your money was going to go through into your account every month.
And where were you living in that meantime?
I was living in supported housing at the time. Like, there was people with drug issues, alcohol issues. I haven't got any of that. I have an intellectual learning disability. There's a difference, but yet you're still tarnished with the same brush.
Okay. So after you being made a ward of court, where did you want to live?
I just wanted my own house.
Okay. And so So what happened? Did your family help you with that, or?
My aunt and my cousin, we had a meeting with the Wards Court, but they wouldn't let me buy a house and stay in Wards Court, so that way I'd be protected.
Mhm.
So we decided to go down the legal road of coming out of it.
Okay. So how did you get out of a ward of court?
I had to go back to the same psychiatrist and psychologist and get them to reverse it, and they agreed to do it on the vision that I take, like, if there's any major issues, I have to speak to my family, so.
And roughly how long did that whole process take from the time your mother passed into?
Jesus, I don't know, so 10 years or something? No, I wasn't. I was made a ward of court 2010, I was out of it by 2012. So they hit me with a lovely bill at the end of it.
So when did you get your new home finally?
2013 I got my own house.
Okay, so
It's
And-
not the house I want, but it'll do. So it's a roof and I have no mortgage, so I can't really argue, you know. Not
And-
many people have that.
perfect, and you're financially stable, and
Yeah, I just have to pay my normal bills, but I have no big outlays, so it's grand.
Mhm. And do the ward courts have any hold over you now anymore?
No,
or you're
no, I
completely
have
free?
my own life. I just
Perfect.
do what I want and that's it.
Very good. So you're living happily ever after now.
Yeah, something like that.
Very good, Claire.
That's
Okay,
it.
thank you very much.